Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Collecting 101. Today's topic, the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo. An expo in review. We'll talk about the good, the bad of the Southern California Retrospective Gaming Exposition 2017. That is a long title. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Retro Collecting 101. I am your host, Mark Flores, host of the Mark F Podcast channel. You can also tune into the other two podcasts that I have, Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast, where I give wrestling news, updates, fantasy booking, etc. Anything wrestling, it's on Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. I also have the very hilarious Mark and Andre Show, where we talk various topics, including film, news, entertainment, conspiracy theories, all on one podcast show. Anyway, I want to talk to you guys about the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo 2017. This past week, February 4th and 5th, 2017, was the Southern California Retrospective Gaming Exposition, also known as the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo. I want to talk about the good, the bad of this young exposition. There's quite a few good things to point out about this event, first and foremost. More. There was a lot more things that they had than they had at the previous event that was held at the Frank & Sons collectible show in the City of Industry. You had a very spacious venue, a bigger venue. They were able to take this year's exposition over to the Ontario Convention Center, and it was a bigger venue, a lot larger, bigger atmosphere. You had a lot more venue space, a lot more vendor space as well. So that meant an overall increase in capacity, vendors, and entertainment. I mean, you also had more arcade cabinets, more YouTube stars, and you had a bigger feel. You actually had the feeling that this was an actual legitimate convention where people were moving around in different aisles and stuff like that. Because over at the Frank & Sons iteration of this expo, you had a very small portion of Frank & Sons cut off solely for this expo. And I swear, if the starting point of where I was at Frank & Sons, I can get a tennis ball and I can literally throw it all the way across the end of the expo and have it bounce one time and hit the wall to the other end of that expo, is extremely small. I wouldn't be able to do it the same way. I wouldn't be able to do the same thing at the Ontario Convention Center because it was a whole lot larger, and that's great. Increased security. You had even an armed guard at the Sony Super Nintendo hybrid thing that they had. One of the most sought-after picture moments that they had at the Southern California Retrospective Gaming Exposition, also known as the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo. You had a stage. You had a stage with the Super Madness guys who were playing Super Nintendo related rock songs, which is cool as well. The YouTube stars were all in full effect. You had Black Nerd, you had the Game Chasers, you had Pat the NES Punk, Frank, Pro Jared, Maximilian was there. I don't know if he had his own little booth there, but he was there. The Completionist was there. The list went on and on with these guys. There was a whole lot of good YouTube talent and a whole lot of good YouTube stars. So if you go on the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo website, you'll be able to see the full list of the people that they had over at this event. And not only that, but I also want to make a big shout out to Phil Moore, who was the host of the 90s game show Nick Arcade. It's always a pleasure to talk with that guy, especially since this show made an impact to me, and I know it made an impact to a bunch of you guys that listen into Retro Collecting 101. So, as you could probably see on my Instagram at Mark F's Modern Life, you saw that he was able to cut a promo for me on my Instagram channel. So I thought that was pretty cool. He's also just a pleasure to talk to, and having that guy come do all those to all the SoCal Retro Gaming Expos is a huge plus to me, along with the other YouTube stars that were there as well that I talked to. With positives are also going to come hand in hand with the negatives, and there's just a few negative things to point out about this convention, but it's not. Luckily, these negatives are some things that the expo itself can recover on. There's nothing that damages this expo to the point where a lot of people won't ever go again. So there's nothing of that at all. It's just minor things that they need to tweak on, and they'll be able to get it fixed, no problem. The double in ticket prices, almost tripling at the door to the previous venue, is understandable since they were able to get more YouTube stars, since they were able to go to a bigger venue. That's cool. That's cool, all within itself. That's excellent. The only thing I had an issue with is that nowhere on the Expo's website does it tell you, and you can check yourself, nowhere on the website does it tell you that you have to pay $10 per day to attend both days. So Saturday you would have to pay a $10 fee to park. Sunday you would have to pay a $10 fee to park. I understand that there is a bunch of other places to park around the Expo, but I'm just talking about the actual Expo itself had a $10 parking fee, and nowhere around the website, the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo website, does it tell you about that. If they tell you about that from the next times going forward, a lot of people will be able to plan that $10, or actually $20 if you end up staying the weekend. They'll be able to accommodate that $20 into their budget. The other thing too is that this is a great example. So say if you actually attend both days, you and another person, you and that other person spend 2 days and park one car there the whole week, that weekend for Saturday and Sunday, you will pay $40 at the door for one person. So that's $80 for the two. And then $20 for Saturday and Sunday for the weekend. And then you end up paying $100 before you even enter the expo itself. But that's if you pay at the door. You end up saving $35. You end up saving $5 if you buy online. So you end up saving $10. But nonetheless, it's still noted that there was an increase in ticket. There was an increase in the admission. Granted, it's a bigger venue, but nowhere on the website does it tell you that there's an actual fee that you have to pay for parking at the Ontario Convention Center. So to the people running the joint, just a simple $10 fee for parking before you enter the venue is always good. Just an FYI there. But my personal experience on the expo was quite positive. So don't let that disregard anything I say more about the negative points that I bring up. Two more negative points that I want to bring up is for people planning the expo, try not to plan it on the busiest night in American sports. The big game was on Sunday of this weekend, February 4th and 5th. So granted that a lot of people weren't there Sunday that were there on Saturday. If there was a slight change in scheduling, I would imagine that the capacity would have increased for Sunday. But when the big game happens, a lot of people like going out to party. So next time there needs to just be a quick schedule change on that. Other than that, it'll go pretty well. And one more tip for the guys planning the expo. Like I said, if it's possible, then you guys should try it. I think it's a good idea, but I'm no expo decorator. I'm no expo layout artist. So if this seems illogical, then whatever. I'm just offering a suggestion here. Try to have the arcades in the very back of the expo. The reason I say this is that think about the expo like a carnival, where the arcades are the main attraction and the booths are the midway. Or you would go all the way, you would have to pass all the vendors to actually get to the arcades. If you end up doing that, you end up increasing a lot more vendor activity. People would have to pass in order to play the arcade games. If you're in the very front of the expo, you would have to pass all the vendors. So that would increase vendor satisfaction. It would increase sales for each particular vendor if you have the arcades in the very back. Because some people just go to the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo for the arcades, for the exhibits, for the panelists, and some of them don't even buy games at all. But if you have all those arcade games in the back, that'd be one added plus to have someone that wasn't initially going to buy a game actually buy a game because they had to go past the arcades. It's just a simple thing that a lot of people that have attractions at carnivals and stuff, that they would do that. They would have the main attraction in the very back and have the midway, all the carnival games in the very front for you to so you have to pass through them. Other than that, for my experience helping out game swappers, assisting a vendor, the overall experience I had was a very positive one. I think the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo has a lot of ambition. I think it could be one of the biggest expos that Southern California has. I think it could rival that of various other retro game expos like Portland and Seattle. So I'm rooting for SoCal Retro Gaming Expo to thrive. And I know with just these quick improvements that they can actually thrive a whole lot more than these other events. The best thing about it is that the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo is a young expo, young and ambitious. Now they're able to take care of the mistakes early instead of taking care of the mistakes later. And now, 5 years along the line, maybe we'll see the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo thrive, to its full outlook. And I know that the guys planning the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo have big plans all the time. So I know that they're going to try to keep improving. And with these improvements that I mentioned, along with a couple of other suggestions that other people have, I know it can do well. And guys, that was my review of the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo itself. One thing I wanted to point out, and I wanted to save this for the very end, is that there was one thing that I saw happen that I kind of want to point it out. And it's not in no way, shape, or form a diss to the vendors. It's not a diss to the expo itself. It's just a diss to the people entering the expo, whether it's a vendor trying to buy games or whether it's a customer trying to buy games. If you come to the expo minutes after it opens and you try to talk down or haggle a listed price that someone has on a video game, I think that is a bold and very audacious move that you try to do. And I think it's very disrespectful as well, because minutes after day one of the expo, you are trying to belittle the price that the person has advertised. I don't think the general rule of thumb is for you not to do that till the very end of the last day of the expo. So it's just something to point out. I personally think it was very tasteless to see some people do that, and I was assisting the biggest booth there at the SoCal Retro Game Expo, so I did see it, so it just really didn't sit well with me when I saw it, but I just wanted to point that out so that way people that possibly know people that do it can bring awareness to that and to them as well. So that was the last thing I wanted to point out. Other than that, I hope the SoCal Retro Gaming Expo from now on can just thrive as much as it's doing now, because we're seeing great improvements in a very short amount of time. It's only been almost a year and a half since it started, so it's cool. I'm glad to see it, and I hope to see it thrive some more. Other than that, this has been Mark Flores with Retro Collecting 101 podcast show. I want to let you know to follow me on Instagram at Mark F's Modern Life. Follow the Twitter at Mark F's Podcast. You can also catch me on the Mark and Andre show, where we talk film, entertainment, conspiracy theories. You can also catch me on Pay-Per Review Wrestling Podcast, where I give news on wrestling updates with WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, etc., etc. If it's wrestling, I like to talk about it. That's 3 podcasts by one man. So I'm fairly busy all the time. But other than that, you guys have a good night. Take care of yourselves and each other.